Good morning. Welcome to the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee meeting today. Today we have on the lineup State Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, and I'm going to speak to the order we're going to go in today. Public Service Commission, and then MDOT, Maryland Aviation Administration. So State Lottery will be up first, and our analysts will get us started. Good morning.
Thank you. I'll start with a proposed deficiency on page 2 for fiscal 2025. That is $830,000 in vendor fees. These fees are based in part on the amount of revenue coming in. So when the lottery revenues increase, so do the vendor fees. There's also a fund swap in the video lottery terminal, or VLT, and gaming operations section, reducing the general fund allocation by $418,000 and using program revenues instead. I'll turn to the fiscal 2026 allowance. There's an overview of the budget on page 3, Exhibit 1. The allowance increases about $9 million, or 7%, to a total of $133 million. And about 90% of that is special funds from gaming revenues. If you look at the pie chart, you'll see 42% of the budget is for central monitoring and control contracts. These are the contracts that cover most of the equipment and the monitoring for the instant ticket machines, lottery control and ticket printing and distribution, and also monitoring slot machines at casinos. There's some variability in how much these contracts cost from year to year, in part because of the vendor fees being based in part on the revenues, like I mentioned, but also because the actual cost of the lottery game can vary if they're using branded content like a Ravens logo or the Monopoly Man or something like that. So those increase by about $5.7 million from the prior year, but that's roughly in line with what it's been like the average over the past few years. 31% of the allowance goes to regular personnel costs. Personnel costs increase about $4.7 million due to salary and fringe benefits. And there's also one new position for a lottery sales rep working with retail stores, but that's more than offset by the agency eliminating 5 unneeded contractual FTEs. There are 2 BRFA provisions I want to mention that would raise taxes on gaming. They wouldn't directly affect the agency's budget, but I did want to mention them. Table games, under the BRFA provision, the tax would rise from 20% to 25%, and the tax on mobile sports betting would rise 15% to 30%. And the extra raised by those tax increases would go to the general fund through fiscal 2027. And then after that to the education trust fund in the case of table games, and to the blueprint fund in the case of sports betting. I'll move to the key observations starting on page 6. All of the gaming revenues were down slightly in fiscal 24, except for sports betting, which was up. Lottery sales totaled $2.7 billion, which is a 1% decrease from the prior year. The general fund revenue from the lottery was $655 million, but that is projected to decrease in 2025 due to an expected decrease in sales and also because of an increase in other disbursements. You'll see some of those other disbursements on page 7, the stadium financing, transit, and local impact grants. The supplemental stadium financing in particular is expected to take a larger portion of the lottery revenues in the next few years as the Orioles and Ravens stadiums are renovated. So $34.7 million will be going to stadium financing in fiscal 25 and $48.2 million in fiscal 26. I'll move to the casino revenues, which include video lottery terminals, or VLTs, and table games. The VLT revenues totaled $1.3 billion in fiscal 2024. You can see that in Exhibit 5. After the casino operators, the largest recipient of VLT revenues is the Education Trust Fund, which received $507 million in fiscal 2024. Table games brought in $626 million, with $94 million of that going to the Education Trust Fund. As you'll see in Exhibit 7, sports wagering revenues increased in fiscal 2024 and are expected to continue to increase, particularly through mobile sports betting. And all of the state revenues from that go to the Blueprint Fund. DLS recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance, and you'll see the text of that on page 12. That concludes my analysis, and I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions for the analysts? Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. I noticed, and I should have noticed it before, but it evidently gets a certain amount of general fund revenue. Looking at the chart on the first page,
Yes.
the blue, so it's like $10 million, no, 12 million, $13 million. Why does it get general fund revenue? I thought it was all self-financing, and obviously it's mostly self-financing. Do you have any idea why there's general revenue in there?
That might be something that the agency could speak to. I'm
Okay,
not
all right,
exactly
okay,
sure, to be
I'll do that,
honest.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the analysts? Thank you. None. Come on up, Ms. Martin, your team. You can grab another chair and bring it. Necessary.
He's our bench coach. Always do that.
Absolutely. All right, just start it when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Jackson and the members of the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. We welcome the opportunity to appear before you today to present the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency's fiscal 2026 budget. For the record, my name is John Martin. I'm the director of the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency. With me today, to my right, is Paula Yoakum, Chief Financial Officer. Also with me today, Angela Jones, Budget Director, Jennifer Beskid, Director of Legislation and Policy, and James Butler, Assistant Deputy Director and Chief of Staff. At this time, we would like to thank the Department of Legislative Services, and particularly Elizabeth Wabel, for her excellent work and analysis of our budget. We would also like to thank Shane Benz and the Department of Budget and Management for their assistance in developing the agency's budget. You have our written testimony that goes into greater detail, but let me begin by giving you an overview of our fiscal 2024 results. Our agency contributed nearly $1.6 billion to support the state of Maryland's good causes, including but not limited to the Maryland Education Trust Fund, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, the state's general fund, which includes public health and safety programs, the state's horse racing industry, the communities and jurisdictions where the state's 6 casinos are located, small, minority, women-owned business programs, and veterans organizations. As you've heard previously, lottery ticket sales contributed nearly $700 million to the state, while casino gaming revenue contributed $824 million, both of which represented slight decreases year over year from fiscal 2023. Meanwhile, sports wagering and fantasy competitions, including daily fantasy sports, combined to contribute over $60 million. The Maryland Lottery program has operated for over 50 years and enjoys broad participation across the state, as 78% of adult Marylanders report playing at least one lottery game in the past 12 months. Since its inception in 1973, traditional lottery sales have exceeded $62.3 billion and have contributed more than $20.1 billion in revenue to the state. The mission of the casino gaming program is to generate revenue for the state of Maryland and to create good paying jobs while maintaining integrity, security, transparency, and fair play. From the opening of Maryland's first casino in September 2010 through the end of fiscal 2024, slot machine and table game revenues generated by our 6 casinos totaled more than $17.8 billion. Casino gaming contributions to the state through fiscal 2024 totaled more than $7.8 billion. The distribution of casino gaming revenue is directed by statute. The casinos generated nearly $2 billion in gaming revenue from slot machines and table games during fiscal 2024. That's a 4.7% decrease from fiscal 2023. A U.S. Supreme Court decision in 2018 paved the way for states to legalize sports wagering. With voter approval on a referendum in November of 2020, Maryland joined a growing list of states implementing sports wagering at brick-and-mortar locations in December of 2021 and on mobile platforms in November of 2022. During fiscal 2024, there were 13 retail sportsbook facilities and 12 mobile online sportsbooks operating in Maryland. Each sportsbook contributes 15% of its taxable win to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, which supports public education programs. In fiscal 2024, these contributions totaled $60.3 million and are on pace to significantly grow in fiscal 2025. Through the first 6 months of the current fiscal year, sports wagering contributions to the Blueprint were $46.6 million, which is an increase of nearly 90% year over year. The agency continues to significantly expand its organization-wide commitment to emphasizing the importance of responsible play across all lines of business. During fiscal 2024, the agency continued working on a responsible gaming program jointly sponsored by the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries, NASPL, our industry trade association, and the National Council on Problem Gambling, NCPG. The agency submitted our first application for responsible gaming certification at the sustaining level to NASPL NCPG last month. A group of more than a dozen staff members from multiple departments spent the last 18 months working on the submission, which includes summaries and documentation of the agency's responsible gaming efforts pertaining to employee training, retailer training, public education and awareness, product oversight, research, and advertising. Agency staff continues to collaborate with the University of Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, with regular meetings between the agency and the Center of Excellence staff to coordinate activities and training opportunities. Recently, we have engaged over a dozen other gaming jurisdictions around the country in monthly meetings to share best practices on a variety of critical issues, including addressing challenges with the illegal gaming market. We are seeing progress on many fronts as we collaborate on areas of mutual concern. In conclusion, as it relates to the fiscal 2026 budget, we concur with the DLS recommended action and request your approval of our fiscal 2026 budget as submitted. Thank you for your time. We are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And before I turn it over to the other members, a couple of things. One, the disbursement that's established by your agency, is there a periodic assessment on those disbursements, the percentage that goes out, or do you guys revisit that at any particular time?
I'm sorry, so the revenue
Yes.
allocations, those are all by statute. We have no authority to be able to regulate those at all.
Okay, so is there anything, I guess I need to find out through the statute if there's any periodic assessment of that, or is it just in statute, and if there needs to be a change, then it has to be legislatively done?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll look into it.
Thank you very much. Second, with your relationship with the University of Maryland for the problem gamblers, we had them before the full committee a week or so ago, and they spoke of the challenges as we continue to expand our gaming efforts here in the state of Maryland. From a staffing standpoint, have they ever, you guys have conversations with them regarding that matter?
We have conversations ongoing with the center. We have, I would term, a good relationship with them. Very responsive to their requests. We, as you heard in my testimony, don't take that responsibility lightly. We are in the forefront of lotteries across the country in putting together programs to make sure the public's aware and the resources are available, and put those people in resource, the people who obviously need those assistance in touch with those services. So yes, we do have constant communication.
Well, I appreciate that, and please keep us in the loop as well.
Sure.
We want to make sure that as we are participating, that our citizens do have the services when they need it. We don't want anything. We don't ever want to have to turn anyone away. So, if you could keep us informed. Senator Rosepep had a question.
More than one. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Fairly brief. First of all, what is this general fund revenue you get?
So the general fund, the allocation that we have, there's 3 different programs that we have. We have the lottery program, the VLT program, and the sports wagering. So the lottery program is fully self-funded. The VLT program is a combination of special funds and general fund. And that's because we only receive 1% of the slot machine revenue. We do not receive anything else. That does not cover all of our administrative expenses. So therefore, we need to have an additional allocation from the general fund to cover that. Sports wagering program is the third one, and that is not funded either. So there's no allocation that we have been given to be able to offset those expenses.
I'm not quite following it. I mean, I hear the words, but you're saying that the second category, which is, which was the second
So
bucket?
special fund and general
No,
fund.
no, 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 I'm talking about the games.
The VLT program,
The
which is the
VLT.
casinos, yep.
The VLT, basically, we're losing money on it?
Well, we're not losing money per se, we're just giving the money
You say it
to,
doesn't cover the costs.
it doesn't cover the cost, no.
That's losing money, isn't it?
Well, we're still making money, it's just that revenue is then being allocated elsewhere to other programs.
Because of the formula,
Yes,
the formula in where the revenue goes.
yes,
I see, okay. And so it'll be the same thing with the third category.
the sports wagering, correct. There is no allocation, we have not been given any type of funding source for that.
I see, okay, thank you. Big picture, and I couldn't do the math in my head, but it looks like basically when you put all the gambling together, it's not growing, it's shifting. Is that the way to think about it?
I would say the last several years, I mean, each year, as you're well aware, Senator, the counter gets reset to zero, and there's no carryover from the year before. So given that, there are some years where you may be up based on the performance of certain games, most notably a Powerball or Mega
Yeah,
Millions.
I
that you
mean,
hear
they
the
can be
$1 billion.
exceptional situations.
Right, so when those things happen, you tend to hear about them, they tend to sway performance one way or the other. But I would say certainly the traditional lottery and the traditional casino gaming are relatively flat, and certainly the growth area for us in the last couple of years has been the sports wagering.
Right, but it looks like, just eyeballing it, that when you aggregate them all together, it's flat. Because the traditional ones seem down a little bit, and they're the big ones.
Well, they're down because the last couple of years were exceptionally above normal. I would prefer to think we're regressing to a mean in this year's performance. So overall, as the industry, particularly over multiple years, is a growth trend.
Okay, all right, thank you. That answers your last question, Mr. Chairman. You have about 300, 400 employees, something like that?
300.
64.
364. Okay, give me the 1, 2, 3 big buckets of what they do.
Okay, so on the lottery side, you have, the majority are probably your retail representatives, so what we would call a sales rep. They're the ones that have, we have 4,300 plus retailers, and so all of those individuals are assigned.
Dealing with the retailers, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
right. So that's the bulk on pretty much the lottery side.
Yeah.
On the VLT program, I would probably say the bulk are the casino compliance representatives. So we're required by law to have employees there 24/7, regardless of the conditions. And so those people are those that are staffing those 6
Okay.
casinos that we have. And then sports wagering, it's,
Well, I would say the third category is our licensing operations.
Yeah.
So it's field sales for lottery, it's compliance for casinos, and licensing, keeping everything legal.
Gotcha, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have a number breakdown for those?
Numbers of employees?
The employees that are.
I could give you a back envelope right now. There's-
No, you can
Yeah,
send
we
it to
can-
us. You can send it to the
Yeah,
committee.
we'll definitely get you specifics.
yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can do that.
Appreciate that. Senator Sullivan?
Yeah, just one thing, on that note, we see that there's like, the workers that work there are contract workers as well. And if there, we can find that number, the separation, that would be good to know as well. I know most of the time those contractor workers, you pay a little more, so we want to see where we're at with that.
Yeah,
That's good.
if I could jump in on that. We've actually been reducing the number of contractual workers.
seen that, yes.
That was a dictate that DBM had requested of all the agencies to start, transferring people into regular positions if we could. So we made that effort. We're always going to have contractuals because we have part-time drawing officials. So our lottery drawings are required to have, a certain number of people there. And those, since it's a part-time work, they tend to be contract, but lower not a lot of money.
Okay.
on those. So
It's
those,
rare, but yeah.
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, we'll get you the
yeah,
breakdown.
we can get you the breakdown, but we've been trying to slowly reduce all of those as well.
Which I know it happens with a lot of our businesses or even the state. We have to have in areas, and it's priority. In some areas, we do have contract orders, which is a priority. For the VERFA and the increase in it doubled from 50 to 30 in 2025, how much is it going to affect you in that type where you're going to see the increase in the table tax game and in the mobile sports wages? How much of a difference is that going to make for you?
Do you mean operationally?
Yeah, operationally.
It's not going to affect us. I mean, it's just an allocation, right? So for us, it's just we're collecting that money and then we're just sending it off to other people. We're kind of in that regards, we're just collecting it and then moving that money on. So that's not going to really impact us.
That's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
be in touch. Look forward to your getting those numbers to us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great weekend. All right, next up will be the Public Service Commission, and our analyst will get us started.
Thank you. I'm Subiksha Bujal and I'll be presenting the budget analysis for PSC. I'll get started on page 1. We have the operating budget summary. In fiscal 26, the budget for PSC increases by 1.6 million or 5.5% to a total of $30.2 million. PSC is primarily funded through special funds obtained through assessments on public service company revenue. On page 2, we have the overview of agency spending. Personnel expenses total $23.9 million or 79% of the budget. Outside of the personnel spending, the largest single item in the fiscal 26 allowance is $1.8 million for outside subject matter experts and technical consultants who assist technical staff and commissioners of PSC. Exhibit 2 on page 3, the proposed budget change chart. As I mentioned earlier, the budget increases by about $1.6 million or 5.5%. The largest increase is in the area of regular personnel expenditures, which increases by about $2.2 million. Contractual personnel cost decreases by about $450,000. Due to conversion of contractual full-time equivalent positions to regular positions. On page 5, we have the personnel data. Fiscal 26 allowance authorizes 10 additional regular positions, a total of 175 positions. As of December 2024, 33 positions or 20% of the total positions authorized was vacant. Out of these 33 positions, 4 positions have been vacant for more than 1 year. An additional 17 positions reflect new positions created in fiscal 25 and have not been filled as of that date. PSC should comment on the efforts to fill long-term vacancies and the status of recruitment for the new positions. Moving on to key observations 1. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows the average residential electricity and natural gas prices. The residential prices for both electricity and natural gas has been increasing over the past 6 calendar years. In September 2024, the average price of electricity for residential customers in Maryland was 18.4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is approximately 8.4% higher than September 2023 and 26.3% greater than September 2022. Natural gas prices are largely seasonal, with prices reaching their highest point from late summer to early fall and declining during summer months. At its seasonal high point in July 2024, the average price of natural gas delivered to residential customers in Maryland was about 25.5 per thousand cubic feet. On page 7, we have discussion about the arrears for PSC. PSC reports monthly data on residential utility terminations and arrearages on its website. However, PSC is currently working on creating a new portal for this data, and thus this data has not been updated since May 2024. PSC should comment on when the portal will be completed and data will be available for viewing. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting PSC to provide this data. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows the PSC reported data on the total dollar amounts of outstanding arrearages for residential utility customers for select Maryland utilities. Exhibit 5 on page 9 shows the service terminations for selected utilities due to restrictions on the circumstances in which a utility may terminate service during winter's heating season between November 1 and March 31st. Utility terminations follow a seasonal pattern. Total utility terminations in April 2024 total 14,883, an increase of 38.7% compared to April 2023. However, in May 2024, we saw a 0.5% decrease compared to May 2023. Exhibit 6 on page 10 shows the third-party retail electric supplier enrollment. Since calendar 2013, supplier enrollment has declined each year, and as of October 2024 was at 14.2%. In fiscal 2023, PSC began posting quarterly data on complaints against suppliers. Quarterly reports for complaints received by PSC has been updated for all quarters of fiscal 2024 on their website. However, quarterly reports for the first 2 quarters of fiscal 25 has not been updated. PSC should comment on the length of time after each quarter ends before the reports are available to be published on PSC's website. Exhibit 7 on page 11 shows the monthly complaints filed against suppliers. PSC reported 514 complaints against third-party suppliers in calendar 2023 and 188 complaints filed in calendar 24 through November of 2024. On page 14, we have a discussion about the Public Conference 56 initiated to oversee Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. PC 56 required that each electric and natural gas public service company subject to the jurisdiction of PSC file a monthly report containing a description of all the projects for which federal funding has been sought. The first round of Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership funding included an award to SMECO to fund the Transmission, Distribution, and Communications Resiliency Initiative. As of September 2024, SMECO was awarded $32.5 million. The award included a $16.8 million cost share from SMECO. The second round of GRIP program funding was announced in October 24. It included awards of $50 million for Baltimore Gas and Electric, $50 million to First Energy, of which Potomac Edison Company is a subsidiary, for projects in Maryland and West Virginia, and a $100 million grant for Exelon Joint Utilities for projects across 6 states. Key observation 4 on page 15 provides an update of the planned offshore wind projects. In December 2024, the U.S. wind offshore wind projects construction and operation plan was approved by the U.S. Department of Interior Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. The first phase of the project has an estimated commercial operation date of calendar 2029. On page 16, we have the operating budget recommended actions. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting PSC provide data on termination and arrears. With that, I conclude my presentation and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? No questions. Mr. Hoover, come on up to your team. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
You can
Good morning,
proceed when
I'm-
you're ready.
Fred Hoover, the Chair of the Maryland Public Service Commission. I'm glad to be here to present the PSC's budget to the Subcommittee on Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. I want to thank the analyst for her review of our budget and our responsibilities. I'll make a few comments, but I'll mainly want to answer any questions you have. Regarding the vacancy situation. So the General Assembly has been recognized the fact that as they have given us more and new tasks to do, they've given us the authority to actually hire people to do those tasks. The one problem, though, is a lot of the issues that we deal with tend to be fairly complex, require a certain amount of expertise, and also tend to be positions that are in high demand, both by the federal government and the private sector. And so, as with a lot of state agencies, we're competing with those entities along with county governments in some situations. I mean, I've had recent situations where two of my existing staffers have been hired away by the WSSC because they pay better than the state does. And so it's been a struggle for us to try and fill these positions, but we make every attempt to try to make reasonable offers. That also has some impact on the outside consultant budget, because to the extent that we cannot get people on board to actually do these things on a full-time basis, there's a need for us to hire outside consultants to advise us on, again, these fairly complicated and difficult subjects. On the arrearage situation, some of this is carryover from the COVID situation. And there was a policy adopted by the Public Service Commission to prohibit utility companies from terminating customers for any reason during the period of the COVID emergency situation. We have now sort of switched back to what had been in place before, and so that's had the consequential effect of raising terminations. But the commission, in response to that problem, has done two things. One, we are actually doing a comprehensive review of the billing, collection, and termination policies of all the utility companies. The initial focus is on the situation that happens in the summertime. Right now, the regulations that we have in place have a fairly stringent process that the utility companies have to go through in order to terminate somebody's service during the wintertime. But the regulations in the summertime are not quite as specific. And so we're in the process of a rulemaking to actually add some more specificity to the requirements that the companies would have to go through in order to terminate somebody's service during the summertime. Because quite honestly, it is just as dangerous to be without utility services such as air conditioning when we're having these heat waves as it is to have heat in the wintertime during extreme winter weather. So we're trying to make the regulations consistent across the board on that. The second thing that we're doing is former Delegate Davis, now Treasurer Davis, enacted a piece of legislation a few years ago that actually gives the Public Service Commission the authority to examine the rates that are charged and the potential to create a sort of special rate to assist low and moderate income customers so that the amount of money that they actually pay would be somewhat lower. And so we're hopeful as we develop this rate, and we're in the midst of that proceeding, so I can't get really into the specifics of what it might look like, but potentially that would have the ability of easing the initial financial burden on the customers that are affected by this, and that should have a consequential effect on the arrearage situation. And on the federal funds situation, we have, for a number of years, encouraged the Maryland utilities to take advantage of all of the grants and loans and other federal incentives that were both in the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Act that was passed by Congress a couple of years ago. They have, to a large degree, pursued a lot of these grants. Some of these they already have in hand. I guess it remains to be seen, given the changes that are happening in Washington, D.C., what impact that's going to have. I suspect that to a certain extent that funding is going to go away over the next few years, but I think the grants that they have right now are probably solid enough. And then the last issue is the offshore wind project. Again, there's been some changes in Washington, D.C. related to the offshore wind project. It's my view that the U.S. wind proposal, which is the one farthest down the road, may be far enough along that it's not going to be affected by the changes in the executive branch on that. Now, there is litigation that's been filed against the project's developers related to the construction to permit, or the construction, the permit to construct that was issued by the federal government, by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, which is the federal siting authority for wind projects, questioning the decision that they made. We don't really have a role in that process because the siting of offshore wind projects is a federal situation, not a state situation, since it's in federal waters. So depending on the result of that litigation could have some impact on the development of that project. So, and I guess the final comment I'll make is we concur with the recommendation from DLS. So, and with that, any questions?
Thank you. Before I go to the others, I have a couple of quick questions for you based on your response. So that internal comprehensive review that you all will be undertaking, is that solely internal, or are you working?
Well, so what we're doing is, I mean, so these are regulations that the Public Service Commission has that guard, that oversee what utility companies have to do in order to terminate somebody's service. So we are in the process of a rulemaking. So it's a formal process where we'll be revising the existing regulations and maybe creating some new regulations, and then that'll go through the regular process of any state agency. It'll eventually come to you before the ALR committee and things like that. But we're in sort of the midst of doing that right now.
All right, thank you. If you could keep us abreast of that, if you could. The reconnection, are you all calculating the time period of the reconnections? I know you had the period of time during COVID where some folks, you didn't have a charge or you didn't have the termination. But when there's a termination of service, do you all calculate or keep a running calculation on how long customers are back, get their connections back? I mean, is there like an average, when you examine those?
I guess, I don't know off the top of my head. I suspect we can figure that out. I mean, there is within the regulations, there's obviously things that the utility company has to do once a satisfaction is made of the existing obligation to them for them to come back and reconnect service. The technology has actually made it a little easier for them to both disconnect service but also reconnect service.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get to is, when a customer finds themselves in that circumstance,
sure.
How long does it take for them to get back up on, and then?
Well, a lot of it depends on, the financial arrangement that's made, quite honestly. And what we're trying to do is to encourage the utility companies to be, to work with customers regarding payment plans and we've tried to sort of de-emphasize the either require, sometimes they want to require a security deposit in order to connect somebody back up. We're trying to push them on those expenses. So again, to make it easier for people to get the financial resources. The other part of the equation is the person being able to find the resources. So we've had a lot of discussions with the Department of Human Services, who run the OHEP program, which is the mechanism that gets the federal funds that provide the vast majority of energy assistance. And so we've worked a lot with them to try to make sure that process of accessing funds gets streamlined so there's money in the pipe. And then once that's done, then we try to work with the utilities to make sure that the payment plans are reasonable enough that somebody can get back on relatively soon.
Yeah, and do you find that the utility companies, all or some, hopefully all, have some sort of program where for customers they could actually elect to say, hey, look, I'll pay it's gonna be it's a tough winter we're going through, right? So if I pay a set amount each month, and then there may be an escrow to that or something, do all utilities participate in such
They
plans?
all have those types of,
I guess you have to be in good
Perfect.
standing in order to get.
well, so here's the rub. The utility companies have sort of said to us, well, we would like the flexibility, ability to quote, work with our customers. I guess it's our view that there needs to be a minimum floor that needs to happen. So when it comes to payment plans, their length, and how soon they start, we're going to create sort of a minimum level. Now, if they want to go beyond that, to be more friendly to the customer, I guess is one a better word, that'll be fine. But we're going to make sure that at the very least, every customer for every utility will be given some sort of payment plan arrangement that's mandated in the regulations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your work in the energy space. Having just spent 2 years on a committee that deals with energy, I have a deep appreciation for your expertise and your accessibility.
Thank you.
It seems to me that your workload has long-term issues, such as dealing with our energy demand for the future, as well as shorter one-time issues such as approvals. So given your HR challenges, I'm a little bit confused as to why you're stepping away from contractual and consultants who might be able to handle some of those shorter one-time issues until you can resolve or find a better approach to hiring permanent employees.
Well, I mean, it's a hard judgment call that we have to make in those situations, and my preference is actually to have people on staff and who are handling this on a day-to-day basis. But again, the challenges of sort of filling those positions has made that sort of difference. So the contractual stuff becomes sort of not a backstop, but a way of trying to sort of deal with these things. I mean, on the bread and butter stuff that we do, which is the rate case proposals that are presented before us, I mean, we have a fairly well-developed, experienced staff of accountants, engineers, and economists who review those filings and things like that on some of these sort of broader policy issues that we've been involved in, particularly ones related to the environment on climate and those types of subjects. That's been a place where we've needed to get some outside help, again, partially because the federal government in the past and the private sector have had a lot of interest in that area, so it's pretty competitive for that. Another area, quite honestly, where we got new responsibility, and it's a obviously important category for us, is cybersecurity. There's a very serious concern about the fact that bad actors might want to try to mess with the electricity, natural gas, and water systems, and it's not usually the ransomware things that the other entities have to deal with. These are usually people looking to create social havoc and things like that. But that being said, it's a pretty important area, and so we've been trying to beef up our cybersecurity stuff that works with the utilities to make sure the grid and the water systems and the natural gas systems are safe from ransom or from cyber attacks and things like that. So it's an ongoing process that we go through to try to, and in some of the situations, there's a potential of turning some of the consultant people into full-time people, but it's an evolving process.
Do you think there's any opportunity for recruiting federal employees in this time?
Well,
of
I guess we'll see.
uncertainty?
I mean, obviously, apparently the governor's been pretty successful in taking on folks, and I certainly would be willing to look at folks like that if they come our way. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a geographic advantage, I guess we have in that
Yes.
sense. So,
Yes, Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Senator Rosepep, real quick, I see that on chart 5, I think it is, that you're, not 5. There's a chart that shows that the complaints have been down, as well as, I'm sorry, here you go, Exhibit 7 on page 11. The monthly complaints filed against suppliers. It looks as if they have been steadily going down, as well as the third-party suppliers.
So I guess regarding Exhibit 6, my view is that is essentially customers voting with their feet to move away from retail energy suppliers. I mean, this legislature last year passed SB 1, which created a fair amount of new consumer protections for people that use retail energy suppliers. But I think that was a result of, quite frankly, years of customer abuse by retail energy suppliers. And so there's been a combination of people realizing that this is not as good a deal as it was made out to be, and efforts, first by the Public Service Commission. I mean, my predecessor, Jason Stanek, started what he would refer to as maximum enforcement, where the commission took action against the really bad actors in the retail energy supply business, and enforcement actions, and pulled licenses, imposed fines, and things like that. Some of that actually led into the efforts to put together SB 1 to sort of codify the stuff that had been done on that. So I think those things have had an impact there. Consequently, the industry actually has gotten better. I think some of the ones that were the really bad actors have either been put out of business or left of their own accord. Some of them, I think, have actually been acquired by some of the larger retail energy supply entities, and that's had an effect of cleaning up the act. But I think the sum and substance is that the industry is better now. Now that we're in the process of implementing SB 1, and so there's a lot of things that rules and regulations and the licensing procedure that we're in the midst of doing. I've had a lot of consultation with the retail supply industry, the individual companies and their trade association to try and work through that so that we can keep the ones in business that are legitimate companies and are offering products that have some value to customers, but also implementing the full intent of SB 1.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Senator Rosepep.
Thank you. The chart on the first page shows you having, I don't know, a couple $1 million in federal revenue. What is that?
Good afternoon, Amanda Best, Deputy Executive Secretary for the PSC. The only federal funds that we receive are for our pipeline safety program. So we have a staff of engineers that go out and implement the federal program. And so we are reimbursed annually for part of the expenses that it costs to implement that program.
Percentage, I'm sorry. You said part of it?
Yes, it's not 100% funding. Essentially what we do is every year we submit a reimbursement request to the federal government, and it varies depending, but they do cover, it varies depending on the year.
Are there criteria set on what you can claim for reimbursement?
Yes, so they will cover cost for, say, direct expenses for, salaries and benefits. They will help us cover costs for the vehicles that we require, our fleet for these individuals that, since they're out in the field most of the time. And they'll actually even cover, part of the cell phone cost, as well as even the rent cost for our office space. So those are mostly what we request reimbursement for.
But you know that up front.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Senator.
No, that's okay. That's helpful.
Said partial, we're in the midst of something here, right?
So what agency does it come from in the federal government?
It's the Federal Pipeline Safety something. I think it's in the Department of Homeland Security, if I remember right.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you know, it's one of these situations, sort of like MDE has a lot of these shared enforcement responsibilities between
understand.
EPA and MDE. So this is a similar sharing mechanism regarding the natural gas pipeline system. So
I get the concept. Where I'm going with this is you may have heard some rumors that the federal government, some agencies are like not providing money for things that they're supposed to. So that's why I'm asking every agency.
And I don't think we've had that issue yet, but I guess we'll see. So
No, so we will actually be submitting our reimbursement. It's due in March. From what we were told, there should not be an impact to the funding that we receive. Obviously, we will know further once we actually submit that.
But you've been in
it
touch
is-
with them since January 20th?
Correct, yes.
Gotcha. And is the funding for the states, I presume other states get this too, not just us. Is it set in statute or is it something else or regulation, or do you have any idea?
I'd have to double check where that is. I don't believe it's in our statute, but it is kind of federally
well, I'm sure it's in
mandated.
some
Well,
federal statute.
yeah, it's in
Because again,
federal.
it'd be the shared authority between
Correct.
the state and the federal government. But we'll check on.
Okay, well, you just check into that and
Absolutely.
let us know the basis of it, whether it's statutory or regulatory. And then secondly, let us know if you get the money or don't get the money.
We'll definitely do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, okay, so that was that question. Second question is, and this relates to offshore wind, but also relates to wind more generally. Big picture, why is it so hard for us to get more wind capacity offshore and onshore in Maryland?
Well, let me start with the offshore. The issue with, and I've, you know, as you know, I've been involved with offshore wind since the original statute.
It's the wind blew.
Right, yeah. So the problem has been historically trying to get everybody going in the same direction. I mean, we've had a situation where the states were really into it and the feds weren't. And then there were situations where the feds were really into it and the state not as much. And, you know, I think when you're standing up a brand new industry, there's just a lot of, you know, problems with it. And the interesting thing is, I mean, when the original bill was passed, the idea was that we create a significant source of renewable energy, because the problem with wind energy in the state of Maryland is the land-based wind is primarily in western Maryland.
Right.
Which of course is the narrowest part
And
of the
ocean
state.
is in eastern.
Right, yeah, I understand. So in order to get the large land-based wind situations like you have in Iowa and Texas and things like that, you know, they're mainly in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So the one place where we could actually build something of that size was out in the ocean in federal water. So that's why we addressed that.
right.
So the idea was it would give us a significant source of renewable energy to put into the grid that would actually help with electricity prices on the shore. The second thing was, you know, the idea was, well, if we get at the ground level of this new industry, not only will we build the projects in Maryland, but up and down the eastern seaboard, and that's actually happening. And the third thing was basically local supply chain stuff to basically supply that. So the 2 and 3 have actually happened. It's just that we had difficulty getting the project on board. The latest thing, you know, once all the government agencies sort of got together and finally pushed the thing through, then you had the difficulties with the products themselves, which to a large degree still come from Europe. They have a very long, well-established wind industry over there. And this was one of the consequences of the war in Ukraine, where European countries that had been using gas from Russia stopped doing that. And so they actually accelerated some of their wind projects. So some of the parts that were destined to come here have now been, you know, kept home basically to build projects there. So it's been, you know, a real struggle on that part. On the land-based stuff, I mean, there's been, you know, the historic siting concerns about, you know, land-based wind projects, sort of similar to the concerns that are raised about solar projects. You know, we worked through that CPCN situation with that. And I think the incentives are there for the land-based wind projects to be created out there. The last issue is the only other place where there's really good wind resources in the state of Maryland is actually way at the southern tip of the eastern shore. And the problem with that is it is right across the bay from Pax River.
Right.
And so there's been wind projects proposed there, but there's been opposition from the military because it impedes on stuff that they're doing at Pax River. And so that stopped projects there, so.
So is there any hope? I mean, seriously, I mean, is it
Well,
kind of pie in the sky?
No, I think, I actually think I mean, apart from, the recent changes in Washington DC, I mean, I actually thought that we've finally got to a place where offshore wind is going to come on board. And it does strike me that, this has been a resource used in Europe for decades. And it strikes me that it really makes sense for us to actually pursue this. And given the fact there were projects up and down the eastern seaboard, it looked like there was enough in the pipeline to make this happen. So I am still hopeful that it's actually going to work. And, there's been all this talk recently about, trying to increase the supply of energy here in the state of Maryland with homegrown projects. And the ironic thing is the project that is actually the closest right now to providing electricity is the U.S. offshore wind project. So, if we get past this latest litigation and they start constructing, it'll be, bringing electricity into the grid relatively soon.
And it's that particular piece of litigation that is the thing holding it up right now?
Yeah, but they're still pursuing it because they've got all of their permits from the feds. They've got the orders from us on the financing part. So they got everything they need to do. Now, hypothetically, this litigation could stop them in their tracks if in fact they win.
But they don't think it will.
But they're pursuing it, and it doesn't appear that there's any reason why it should be stopped. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. Last question, Mr. Chairman. AI. So we're asking, or at least we're asking each agency. Your agency mostly does analytical stuff, right? Most of your people, they're lawyers or economists or whatever. That sounds made to order for AI to increase productivity. Have you guys started looking at that at all?
We have looked a little bit into AI. I would say that we've been cautious about it, mostly because of the sensitive nature of the work that we do. But to your point, there are some programs that can help, mostly with, I would say, analyzing large volumes of data.
Yes, exactly, which is what you got.
Right, and so we have started to look into those options. We've kind of tested one or two out. And so I would say that we're still mostly in the research phase, but we are looking into it.
Gotcha. Okay, when you come back next year, if you could tell us kind of what you've learned, what you're thinking about, what you think the opportunities are. Okay. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We appreciate that. Before I go to Senator Salling, just quickly, the IIJA grants. Any word on any challenges?
As I mentioned earlier, we have been consistently pushing the public utility companies to do. There's some of that money was set aside for agencies like MEA and also us, and we've pursued some of that funding, but a lot of it had to do with grants and loans that were aimed at the utilities because it funded stuff, projects and things like that. And so that's what they did. And so we encouraged them. And in fact, part of that encouragement was encouragement we got from you, when you pass various statutes to say, hey, make sure that we take advantage of all the federal funds that are there. And so the utilities, to their credit, have been trying to pursue that, and it's been an iterative process sort of between MEA, us, and the utilities to try to make sure that we are aware of all the funding things and we pursue all the ones. So I think a lot of their projects are far enough down the pipe that it's going to be okay. And my concern is that the future tap is probably going to get turned off. So
Understood. Lastly, for right now, water utilities.
What's that?
The water utilities.
So, what we have are a combination of investor-owned utilities, Baltimore Gas and Electric, Potomac Electric Power Company, Potomac Edison, Delmarva Power and Light, Columbia Gas of Maryland, Washington Gas Light. We also have one co-op, or two co-ops, Southern Maryland Electric Co-op, which is actually one of the largest, from a customer standpoint, it's actually one of the largest co-ops in the country. And then the one on the Eastern Shore. What's that? Choptank. Yeah, Choptank Co-op. And then we actually have some municipal utility companies, Easton, Hagerstown, Williamsport, Thermont. So it's a combination of those entities. And so our regulatory authority over them vary, With the investor-owned utilities, the private ones, we supervise them. We actually, oversee what rates they charge, and they come to us for permission to raise the rates. Same thing to a certain degree with SMECO, and although Chop Tank actually got exempted out of our jurisdiction, so we don't have to do much over them. And we do the same thing with the munis, although it's more sort of review and making sure that the prices are reasonable because they're nonprofit entities.
So talk a little bit about the water utilities.
Well, most of the water services obviously are controlled either by the city of Baltimore, which deals with the city and then surrounding counties and WSSC. There are a number of private water companies. They tend to be smaller, although there's been a trend now in acquisition of these smaller water companies in the state of Maryland by larger multi-state entities, sort of similar to electric and gas utilities. So we do regulate the prices for the private water companies. They file a rate case just like an electric company does, and we do the same review of the services. The challenge there with water companies is actually infrastructure and maintaining the pipes to make sure that the water service is adequate and clean and reliable.
Yeah, so when you're talking about some of the folks that you talked about, like with SMECO, which is where I'm at, Southern Maryland and Prince George's County side, but all the way through Southern Maryland. And you have many of the folks there on well and septic. So from that standpoint, I guess that's who regulates to make sure that these systems are where they are supposed to be, in addition to the health department and some other folks.
Well, we have engineers that sort of review the infrastructure of any system, whether it's the electric wires, the natural gas pipes, or the water pipes. And actually some of the analysis in the rate cases for the private water companies, a lot of it focuses on the infrastructure, the water pipes themselves to make sure that they're working right and not leaking and things like that, so.
Okay. Is that it? You guys good? All right, Senator Solly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the information. This is a couple questions. Going back to the utility, the increaces, and it says September 24th, the average price of electricity for residents to customers. The Maryland was 18.4 percent, which is approximately 8.4 higher. And then in September, the 28th, it was 26.3 higher. It says that Maryland has grown faster than the U.S. average. And, it's knowing that the problem that we have here in Maryland, and we know we don't want brownouts, we don't want blackouts or anything like that. We need to find other resources, and we've talked about this, and I'm sure you have as well. Is the major problem the supply and demand, or is there other things that we should be looking at?
Well, I think it's twofold. One, the supply situation obviously is complicated by the fact that, in the old days, BG&E owned the power plants and provided all the electricity. Well, now we're in a situation where the power plants, no matter what they are, the renewable folks even, or the fossil folks, are now sort of a private industry, and all that's sort of run by PJM, which, has this marketplace where people bid in to it. And so the issues with the generation prices have been affected by the supplies that are there, maintaining the existing power plants. But the theory behind the PJM system is that marketplace would provide incentives for people to build power plants of whatever sort, whether it's a fossil plant or a renewable plant, in order to supply the electricity that's in the PJM marketplace. And for a variety of reasons, that market hasn't really functioned. And so, we've had, and we don't regulate PJM. I mean, the PJM is run by a committee of stakeholders that include transmission companies and generation companies and things like that. But the public service commissions don't have any authority in that. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does regulate them to a degree. And so there's been a lot of arguments about the rules of PJM's auctions and the situations with their market. The other issue has been a lot of entities who want to supply power are trying to get permission to plug into the PJM system. It's called the interconnection process. And there's been, for years, difficulties with their interconnection process because it's too slow and it's impeded, sources coming in there. Now, PJM has made a number of efforts to try to fix that problem, and they claim that, it's going to get better. And they're actually trying to do things like prioritize projects that are closer to being brought on. But that dysfunctional market has led to an increase in the generation and the energy price that's paid. Now, the other piece of the puzzle, obviously, is the expenses that the utilities have to operate their business. And like any other business, I mean, they've been affected by inflation like anybody else. And so, when they file for a rate increase, we, look at the expenses they've had and things like that. But under the law, they are entitled to recover their prudent expenses that they spent delivering electricity to people's homes and stores and schools, along with a opportunity to earn a profit that would be comparable if they were in the private sector. And so, the same economic conditions that affected all the other businesses affect them. And so the combination of the two has been a problem. So I think the response is sort of twofold. One, we should be trying to look to see that we use electricity in the most efficient way possible. And so the Empower program that you enacted a few years ago, we've worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development to make sure that those efforts are actually focused on low and moderate income customers to help them control what they do when they use their electricity. And a concern I've actually had is that there's been a lot of effort by Google, Amazon, folks like that to offer products and services that allow customers to actually manage their electric service and other things and sort of customize it. I've been concerned that those entities, because they're private sector companies, are going to market their products to the demographic groups that they think are going to be the most profitable for them and ignore other parts of the customers. So you theoretically can almost have a bifurcated utility system where some customers get advantage of new products and services and other customers don't because they're not considered to be attractive enough. And so I've tried to encourage the private sector companies, even though we don't regulate them, to make sure that they provide these services to everybody across the board. The other thing we can do is try to look to figure out a way to use electricity in the most efficient process all across the grid. And so we now have the capacity to actually generate, store, and use electricity simultaneously. So instead of the old system of just one big central power plant that sent all the electricity into a town and then to the houses, you could have energy generated at people's houses, even through their cars, that can be stored through battery systems within the grid itself at people's houses. And so this idea of generating, sharing, and using electricity simultaneously will actually lower the amount of electricity that we actually need, and that'll help deal with the overall adequacy issue.
I mean, I understand the grid part and how important that is and what we need. I understand the part where you talked about before about bad actors and the fraud that's been happening, especially in my county, in Baltimore County, in the Dunlock area, and it was bad. And I'm glad we moved forward. We were trying to do the right things about that. But just you as part of the Public Service Commission and having the conversations that you can have, but not the authority, which we do understand. We think we would like for you to have more teeth, if it's possibility, to do more of the bite and have the opportunity to have more say, which is probably impossible, but still, there's got to be ways where we can continue to grow in areas in Maryland. It's a proven fact that, people that know me know I'm for any type that's going to benefit the state of Maryland and not have these higher rates to be a burden down to their customers. Okay, and that's our problem right now. And that's ongoing. And all I'm saying that for that reason is that the other resources that we're looking into right now are going to be a minimal. They're not going to be the factor to make the difference. and to eliminate other parts that are important that are already here that could be the benefit for the state of Maryland, that still should be ongoing. We should never try to eliminate that. It's an asset. Losing an asset is not a benefit for anyone. And Maryland should look into every avenue that we have to benefit the state of Maryland, to benefit our customers. So we don't have the burdens, so we possibly could be in the place of a brownout or a blackout. And I say that for this reason. I think we're not doing that right now.
Well,
I think it should be a priority.
And I agree with you, but part of the problem is, right now, the role of the Public Service Commission is to review private sector projects. So if somebody wants to construct a solar array or a wind farm, or even build a power plant, fossil fuel power plant, they come to us with an application, we review it along with PPRP for approval. So we're kind of dependent upon, the private sector to bring those projects to us. And again, I think part of the problem is this dysfunctional market at PJM apparently isn't providing the right incentives to the power industry to do that. Now, along the lines of trying to keep all the resources there, I mean, we've recently concluded a settlement at FERC regarding the Brandon Shores power plant to keep that as part of the mix of resources, because there was some talk about closing that one down. And so, we're open to, reviewing and approving, any of the power projects that come in front of us. I've tried to sort of work through the particular siting concerns, because one of the things I said yesterday was, it's all well and good to talk about let's have homegrown energy and build energy projects here, but quite honestly, the siting of an energy facility of whatever it is, a power plant, a solar array, a transmission line, becomes contentious just because it does wind up in somebody's backyard when it's all said and done.
We know that?
Yeah. And so, so while it's a desire to have homegrown energy, there's a trade-off in the sense that somebody's got to live next door to it, and that's part of what we got to work through.
I understand that, and we can go on about that for a period of time, but I do just want to speak briefly on the turnover and the problems that we've had there. We've talked about a lot of our different departments that we met here, as the chairman would say many times over, that's one of our priorities of keeping our people. And that turnover seems to be pretty big. Is there something more that we could do to try to, as we are partners with you? Is there other things we can look to assist training? Is there a problem with that,
Well, actually,
I mean, like that?
Amanda actually is sort of the point of the spear when we're dealing with the recruitment, retention stuff. So why don't you, if you have any thoughts go ahead. So.
Sure. No, thank you. I would say, kind of like Chair Hoover mentioned, part of our biggest, at least, retention and recruitment issue is obviously salary, right? And so we do have limited independent salary setting authority in certain situations, but not always. And so we kind of mentioned in our responses, we're trying to work right now with the Department of Budget and Management on a project to expand the classifications we have to kind of, for retention purposes, allow for folks that are experts and have grown that expertise within our agency to have a longer career path. So for example, right now, if you have an engineer, they can be a 1, a 2, or a 3, and then they'd have to go into management. We'd like to make that a 4 or 5, or allow so there's longer pathways so we can keep people longer, right? And so that's one thing that we're working on. And I think that will help us to retain some folks, because then we can offer them a higher salary if we can get them to a higher grade. But those are kind of, we do really encourage training. We try and train our folks. So, but we're obviously open to any suggestions or anything, and we're happy to, because we really do want to keep our employees and attract the best folks, just to enact, the mission of the agency.
And I know that's always a priority with our agencies and how they want to keep their good employees, because it's a tough thing to get in the first place. If I could, Mr. Chairman, last thing, you did talk about complaints, and, it seemed like in 19 and how it started going down. It seemed like you were in a good place, but it seems like a little bit it's gone up. And I know there's a lot of complaints in many different areas that they could complain about, but are you think you're meeting that need now that we're satisfying not just our customer, but those that are all the complaints that are coming in? Are we trying to help that out? And is there maybe more we need to do?
No, actually, I think we've sort of beefed up our consumer assistance division and tried to make them, more responsive to that. I think as the rules and regulations roll out on the retail suppliers, it'll sort of, diminish the active complaints that come in. So, some of the complaints related to the regulated utility companies are not so much bad actions by them, but more disputes over amounts and things like that, where we sort of mediate through that to come to a solution. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And before we close, had a short conversation with the chair yesterday.
Yes.
And there are some agencies that come before us and they talk about salary schedule, sort of looking at that. So anything you have, any ideas you have, please feel free to share with us.
I will. We appreciate it.
All right, have a great weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes the hearing for PST. Next up, Maryland Aviation Administration, and our analysts will get us started. Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Steve McCullough, Department of Legislative Services, here to present the Maryland Aviation Administration's fiscal 2026 budget request. Looking on page 1, you can see that the fiscal 26 allowance for the operations of the MAA increased by $14.2 million, or nearly 6%. The PAYGO chart is shown on the next page. We'll have a further discussion on the PAYGO program. The MFR measures discussion begins on the bottom of page 4 with the first chart showing passengers at BWI Marshall Airport. You can see that it's a little hard to tell, but in 2024, passenger count exceeds the 2019 pre-pandemic level for the first time since 2019. Looking at page 6, Exhibit 2 shows the market share proportion between Baltimore, BWI Marshall Airport, IAD, which is the Dulles, and DCA, which is the Reagan National. And between 23 and 24, BWI Marshall Airport did see a slight increase relative to the other two airports. Exhibit 3 on the top of page 7 shows the cost per enplaned passenger. This is a kind of an industry standard calculation that's made to look at, as it says, the cost per enplaning each passenger. So the more passengers an airport can service, the lower that number becomes, and it's attractive to airlines to fly out of those airports. And between 23 and 24, BWI saw its CPE drop, which is a good thing. Page 8 shows the agency spending summary. This shows that BWI Marshall Airport is, almost all of the MAA activity, almost 97% of their expenditures. Martin State Airport, which is the other state-owned airport, accounts for another 3.2%, with a small piece being representing the regional aviation projects. The MAA does support all of the state's public access airports through their budget. On page 9 and continuing on to page 10 is the proposed budget changes. As I mentioned at the beginning, MAA's budget increases by $14.2 million over the current year. Personnel expenses increased by 1.7% over the current year working. You can see in the middle of page 9, the first line under operations, the largest single increase in their fiscal 2026 operating budget is the restoration of contractual services that were cut in the 25 budget as part of the cost containment when it came in last year with the kind of department-wide trying to boost spending for the capital program. There was cost containment, which can now be due to the new revenues passed last year and proposed for this year, allowing some restoration of those operating reductions that were made. Looking at page 11, this is the net income calculation that we show. MAA is one of the three modes in transportation that does raise revenues. And you can see that MAA covers its operating costs through the revenues it raises each year, although things do get deposited into the trust fund, so it's not a direct, but this does show that their operating revenues more than cover their operating expenses, and in fiscal 2026, it's actually covering their capital expenses as well. Looking at the top of page 12, this is the personnel data for MAA. In the 26 allowance, they get one new position in the operating and one new budget position. The new operating is for an information tech support position, and the capital position is an executive 5 position to help support the capital program. Exhibit 7 on page 13 shows the discretionary grants that the MAA has received over the past year from the IIJA. They had 3 discretionary grants totaling $21.8 million that they got awarded. PAYGO capital program description begins on page 13, and the Exhibit 8 on page 14 shows the 6-year capital program. System preservation accounts for 36% of the 6-year spending. Expansion and efficiency projects account for a further 42%, and security and safety projects account for another 12%. The fiscal 2026 allowance for MAA, which totals $322 million, is shown in Exhibit 9, which goes from page 9 and, or excuse me, page 15 and 16. You can see that the Concourse AB connector baggage handling system is approximately 50% of their total fiscal 2026 capital budget allowance. The cash flow analysis discussion begins on page 16. Exhibit 10 on page 17 shows the comparison between the 25 budget as introduced, the 25 working appropriation, and the difference between the working and the allowance. The 25 change between the introduction and the working appropriation by $8 million decrease. Those projects making up that change is shown in Exhibit 11 on pages 18 and 19. Between the 25 working and the 2026 allowance, the capital program decreases by nearly $41 million. By project changes are shown in Exhibit 12 on pages 20 and 21. On page 22 is the discussion of the first year funding. As you are all aware, beginning with the January 2023 CTP, MDOT has been required to show projects that are receiving first year funding for either construction or design, either in the current year, if it was not in last year's CTP, or in the budget year. And for fiscal 2026, 36 million of MAA's capital program, representing 11%, is first year funding. The first year funding split between both the current year and 2026 are shown on Exhibit 14 on pages 23 and 24. That takes us, page 25 is the recommended actions. The one recommended action on the operating side, you've seen this a couple times in other modes that you've already heard. We're recommending that the one new position, the PIN and the dollars be deleted. Not that the position's not needed, but that the department as a whole has sufficient vacant positions, and given the fiscal condition of the state, that it would be prudent to reclassify a position instead of creating a new one. For the PAYGO side of things, the capital budget, the recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance. I will just note, because I know it was of interest in previous years, on page 26 is an update on the concessions contract. They did actually submit this to the last Board of Public Works. It was withdrawn to give the members more time. I just saw, checking email earlier in the hearing, the item has been resubmitted for next week's BPW meeting for approval. So if that goes through, then they finally end the process of bringing on the new contract, which is for the current vendor that's been managing concessions for the last 20 years. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions for the analysts?
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Sullivan.
Yes, so I just want to see if I can maybe get some information on page 19 about the runway improvement program that they are now changing for 11.6, and seeing if it is because they're taking the A10s away or what, but if there's an answer to that.
So the cash flow changes are very common in the capital program because they do work on a cash basis. The CTP, it's not like on the GO bond side where things get encumbered and so it doesn't change year to year. Right. So these are generally normal changes. You'll see it disappear in one year and reappear in the next, or conversely, sometimes they pull it forward because projects are ready, and then it decreases in the subsequent year because they've already done it. On that particular project, that would be the agency would need to respond as to the exact reason for that change.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. All right. You're up.
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and members of the committee. For the record, Samantha Biddle, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Transportation, here on behalf of Secretary Wiedefeld, who sends his regrets from the governor's cabinet convening today. I'm joined today by Ricky Smith, Executive Director and CEO of the Maryland Aviation Administration, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss the Maryland Aviation Administration's budget. Thank you, as always, to Mr. McCullough for his work to prepare today's analysis. Maryland's aviation assets are an integral part of the state's transportation network. Public use airports across the state help support a dynamic economy and offer important services for residents and businesses. The MAA works to help enhance operations, improve the passenger experience, and maintain the safety and efficiency of our airport facilities. The airport facility facilitates the seamless movement of people and goods, but also drives economic growth, attracts business investments, and supports thousands of jobs. Mr. Smith will provide specific details, but we're supporting critical capital projects that enhance our airports while providing innovative improvements for all of our partners. In addition, the department and the MAA continue to support the public use airports that serve our communities in every corner of the state. I want to acknowledge and thank the entire MAA team for their hard work, and now Executive Director Smith will offer additional comments and address the DLS analysis.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Biddle. And it's good to be here, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and provide some update on what's going on with the Maryland Aviation Administration. For the record, my name is Ricky Smith, and I am the Executive Director and CEO of the Maryland Aviation Administration. I also want to thank Mr. McCullough for his amazing collaboration and coordination and guidance as we went through this process. He's an amazing professional, and we always appreciate the work you and your team do, so thank you very much. BWI Marshall Airport, Martin State Airport, and the Maryland Aviation System boost global connections and economic activity across the state. Our public use airports across the state contribute to job creation, business development, and worldwide access. BWI Marshall Airport in particular is key for this economic activity and the global connectivity. The airport serves as a vital gateway for domestic and international travel along with cargo operations. Furthermore, the airport produces an annual economic impact of some $11.3 billion while generating and supporting and sustaining more than 107,000 jobs throughout the region. Even as BWI Marshall serves as a vital economic catalyst that supports innovation and tourism, we recognize and prioritize our position as a good neighbor. Our position is powered by a strong commitment to our 5 pillars: community engagement, youth engagement, economic development, military support, and environmental sustainability. We focus on initiatives that drive positive change and ensure that our presence benefits local residents in meaningful ways. As we like to say, we'll take you there, but we spend here. As a service update, BWR Marshall has recovered and then surpassed pre-pandemic passenger traffic levels. We had a record-breaking summer in 2024, as the governor announced, for airline and passenger traffic, with an all-time monthly passenger record set in June, and then shortly after that, it was outdone in July. For the calendar year, we had more than 27 million total passengers, again, setting our pre-pandemic level traffic marker. NMA's capital budget, we continue to advance important projects that will improve BWR Marshall and Martin State Airports. Our work is enhancing BWR Marshall for our customers while providing important facilities for our airline partners. We have major capital improvements that will transform the passenger experience and provide additional capacity for our stakeholders. For example, the AB Connector and Baggage Handling System project is the largest capital improvement project in the airport's history. Major components of this work will be complete late this year in December. Another project to support Southwest Airlines, their new airline maintenance facility, is set to open this summer. I must note that these advancements will occur as we celebrate a significant milestone in the airport's history. This June will mark the 75th anniversary of BWR Thurgood Marshall Airport. The anniversary will offer a chance for reflection, but also an opportunity to look forward to the future. So I'm pleased to say that the future of aviation in Maryland is bright. At the MAA, we are poised to further grow and succeed. I remain incredibly proud of and grateful for the dedication and good work of our MAA team at BWR Marshall and Martin State Airport, and in support of the public use airports across the state of Maryland. Moreover, I must applaud the 13,000 employees that call BWR Marshall and Martin State Airports their place of employment. I thank the committee again for the continued guidance and support. That being said, the department respectfully does not concur with DLS recommendation to delete funding for a new information technology tech support position. This position will support the department's cybersecurity efforts. As you know, security of the nation's critical infrastructure requires focus on both physical security as well as cybersecurity of the state's transportation assets. The department has been aggressively filling vacancies through its Taking New Places recruitment campaign and has one of the lowest vacancy rates among state agencies. The vacancy rate for the Maryland Aviation Administration, for example, is 5.4%. That's 27 positions, and most of those positions that are vacant are in maintenance and operations that provide critical support during emergencies and snow removal exercises. The department appreciates DLS's otherwise concurrence with the governor's allowance. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. And again, thank you for the time.
Thank you both for your presentation. And I'm excited about that 75th anniversary, so please include us,
Sure will.
in the party. So don't forget about your friends over here. I am a frequent flyer, at least once a month coming through your airport, and I go there instead of going to DC. I'm leaving Brandywine and coming up. I'd rather go up 3 than to go in the city.
I appreciate your service and your intelligence, sir.
Sometimes you fall so much, you got to get it right sooner or later. So, but I commend the staff there. Watching the transition, the continuous progress and customer services is what it's all about. So it's I'm glad to see. What did you say? 107,000. I'm sorry. The number of passengers, 27 million.
27 million passengers.
27 million.
Yes. 107,000 jobs.
Yeah, 107,000 jobs. That's great. I have a couple of questions before I pass it on to the other members. First, there was no mention of the merger. There's always a conversation about mergers going on with a couple of your airlines that are associated with your airport. If those mergers were to go through, what type of impact would that be on your facility? or would there be?
Well, thank you for the question. The latest merger, which is now a non-issue because the U.S. Department of Justice opposed it and the court ruled against it, was the proposed merger of Spirit Airlines and JetBlue. Through the Attorney General's office, we opposed the merger because it would have had an adverse effect on our airport. Spirit Airlines has pretty aggressive growth plans for the airport, at least they did at that time. And our concern when we analyzed the combination of markets that the new combined airline would serve, that the new airline would not be motivated to continue to serve the growth markets that Spirit was planning. And so we opposed the merger. But again, DOJ was against it, the courts ruled against it, and so that is a non-issue for us. I am not aware of any other mergers that have matured that might impact us, but we always pay close attention to any merger that affects our airlines.
No, and I appreciate that. I know that initially, or not initially, but prior to that, there was a conversation about Spirit and Frontier.
Yes.
I think that one as
Yes.
well. So,
And we opposed that merger, and it's
Yes.
no longer. Yeah.
appreciate that. Secondly, so market share projections. Again, you guys are doing a terrific job there. Do you have any, do you project out any information you can share with us regarding the any market share projections coming up?
So again, thank you for that question. So we're in a very competitive market. There are three major commercial airports in this region, and we battle very aggressively in the DC metropolitan area, where those passengers that have an option can make a choice to go somewhere else. And so we're doing quite well winning that market, but we have to continue to battle. As you look at the chart, I mean, the chart is split in the 30s, down to 30%. And so, so any, marginal movement at any airport could change the allocation of traffic. When Southwest came to us and advised us that, and you may remember this, that they could not grow at BWI Marshall anymore without more capacity in their baggage handling system. The state invested in what is the largest project in the history of the airport now, the AB Connector Baggage Handling System project. That is going to provide Southwest enormous capacity to bring more seats to the market. We think that will put us in a strong position to expand our hold on the market. We are a low-fare airport, and the market seems to be trending towards low-fare options. And so, so I believe we have a structural competitive advantage over the other two airports as long as we're able to provide our carriers the capacity to grow. And this new Southwest facility renovation will position us to that.
And you mentioned that that connector will be completed December?
It will be completed in December on time and on budget. All the public-facing aspects.
From a committee of appropriators, we love to hear that. On time and on budget. Thank you about that. So that's and lastly, for right now, actually, I'm going to go around and then I'm going to come back and speak to you a little bit about the audit findings, and so we can talk about that. We'll wrap up. Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It may be too soon to tell, but I'm curious as to how the recent string of air accidents might affect your volume, either negatively because people may be reluctant to participate in air travel for a while, or increase it because of a shift in preference for regional airports. I mean, given all the information about how busy Reagan is, I could see people trying to shift their flight schedule to BWI. Have you seen any evidence of that, or is that something that's even on your radar?
Well, first, let me publicly offer our condolences to the families that were affected by that tragic. Anytime that happens in our industry, it's clearly an unwanted event, and we all are saddened by that incident at what we consider our sister airport, DCA. Although we compete with them, we do partner with them in many respects. I think it's important to be reminded that air transportation is still the safest form of travel in the country. However, when there is an incident like that, it gets a lot of news, one, because it's so rare, but also because it involves so many people. The incident at DCA is under investigation, so I won't talk much about that, but it appears that the incident was not caused by the operations of the commercial aircraft, right? And so we have not had an accident in 16 years that could be contributed to the operations of a commercial aircraft, right? In that particular case, another aircraft happened to run into a commercial aircraft, and that does have the effect of causing people to be concerned. And so we're paying a close attention to that. It's too early now to really determine what the impact will be, but as a representative of the industry, we're constantly reminding people that despite what happened at DCA, air travel is still the safest form of transportation in the country, and commercial operations are still extremely safe.
What about a potential shift in preference of airports?
Well, I will say this, about a year and a half ago, there was a proposal to add slots at DCA, to expand the slots. DCA is a slotted airport. And we went on record opposing that because it would have an impact on, we thought it would have an impact on demand at BWI Marshall Airport. They ultimately agreed to increase, to add 4 additional slots, and we estimated that that would have the impact of about 250,000 passengers on BWI. Well, if adding more slots, which adds more operations, would have an impact on BWI, if they decide to cut back on slots at DCA, then we would imagine that would have a beneficial impact on the airport. But I think it's premature at this point to determine what Congress is going to do. I think they're more focused right now on trying to understand what caused the incident and what corrections you can put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, sir.
And just want to commend you on the great work that we're doing at BWI. You guys are just doing amazing work, and we see the outcome. You heard my question. I just wanted to just find out, maybe possibly, is this just something that's not necessary this year, or is it something we're looking at down the road where the improvement for the runway for Martin's and the improvement there? I know they were going to lengthen that out and work on there, but is it something still down the road, or is this pausing, or what?
So I think this is purely a cash flow presentation. The rehab project at Martin State Airport has been completed.
Okay.
And it is open to the public, and it's operating fine. There's some associated work associated with that. We have to do some obstruction removal. We're working very closely with MDE on that. There may be some taxiway work, but the runway rehab project has been completed.
Can I get that information?
Absolutely.
We could have that. That would be helpful.
We can get it to the committee,
Yes, we will.
and we'll make sure everybody gets it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I did see the packet. All right, Senator Rosepap.
Thank you. Want to talk about federal money?
Federal money.
So page 2 looks like, I don't know, $100 million, $150 million. So, no, maybe more like $100 million.
To page 2?
Page 2, the chart with the
Got you.
green. Yeah, I'm just saying, look at the green, federal. So, no, am I doing my math wrong? It's like $50 million, let's say. What is that? Where does that money come from, and what is that money for?
So, first of all, thank you for the question. So, the Congress's efforts to fund infrastructure investment in the aviation system is done primarily through what's called the Airport Improvement Program, AIP, and that happens in a couple ways. One is an entitlement fund, which airports get based on its percentage of operations based on the total system. Okay? And we get that every year. The other
Is that
piece,
set up in law or is that set up in
that's
regulation?
set up in law. That's enacted in
Okay.
in the authorization of the Federal Aviation Program.
Okay.
It's not dissimilar to the federal formula funds that we talk about, more commonly at State Highway and at MTA.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's not dissimilar to the federal formula dollars
I
that
see.
were
Yeah, I got you.
kind of the bread and butter at our other
Got it.
modes.
Okay.
And the other half of that AIP program is discretionary. It's discretionary funding source. And in that case, we compete with other airports for projects. And so that's been with us for years, and that will likely be around for years. During COVID, as a part of relief for COVID, IIJA or bipartisan infrastructure law funds, depending on how you want to describe it, there were a number of airport-related funding sources that came out of that as well. Those were all competitive funding sources. And so we also got some funds through that project as well. And then lastly, which is not, it's a federal authorization, is the passenger facility charge program, where we're authorized to, airports are authorized to tag $4, up to $4.50 on each ticket. And those funds are used for infrastructure investments. And all of those funds, all of the programs I just mentioned, they do have restrictions. They have to be associated with capacity enhancement, safety. They cannot be associated, for example, with revenue generation. They cannot be speculative.
Gotcha. And those money from the passenger fees, those go to the airport where they're collected?
That's correct. They're collected by the airlines, and then they're remitted to the FAA and sent to the airport.
Gotcha. So during that 2-day of the president's executive order about stopping grants, which, if any, of your money was at risk?
So for some time, the airport district office was not clear on what the impact was going to be on FAA funds. We do know that we have some bipartisan infrastructure funded projects that may be at risk. That has not been determined yet. But the funds through the AIP program, those funds are pretty much obligated. We don't see those being at risk.
That's the formula.
That's the formula, right.
So the grant money, what has the relevant federal agency said to you about the grant money, most recent information?
They've only asked us to, they've advised us that there are 2 projects that they're looking at. We have a passenger boarding bridge project that's funded, that has some bill funds in it, and then the Martin Air Traffic Control Tower has about $6 million in bipartisan infrastructure law funds. And so they've advised us that they are looking at those projects, but they have not yet determined what they're going to do, if anything.
And do the funds come through a reimbursement structure or something else?
Yes, they do.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
We get the funds from the trust fund,
Yeah.
and then we reimburse the trust fund as the federal funds come in.
Gotcha, thank you. Thank you.
Good. All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you all very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the audit. Sorry about that.
You can't pull that back now, can you?
Yes, I can, yes. Yes, I can, I'm sorry. It's Friday, so. First off, we appreciate, out of the 4 audit findings, that 3 were not repeated. And 1 was repeated, finding number 2. So if you could walk us through the 4 findings, Mrs. Smith.
Yes, so.
And where we are
So
currently.
there were 4 findings, and thank you for your point about 3 of them not being repeated. And so I will paraphrase. The first finding was related to how our concessions, our food and retail developer, used what's called marketing funds.
Yes, and for the record, I'm sorry, I should have said this beforehand. This is the March 24th audit finding, so that's just for the record.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So as a part of the contract with Fraport, they have the authority to collect, as a part of their rents from subtenants, a percentage of sales that go into a marketing fund. And and they are allowed to use those marketing funds to promote the program. The contract is not very clear on how they can use those funds. It gives them kind of some broad discretion. However, it was determined that there were some uses that were clearly inappropriate. And the auditor suggested that we go back to Fraport and ask them to reimburse those funds, which they have done, I think, to the tune of $280,000. They've reimbursed those funds. There are some other funds, however, that Fraport is of the opinion that they are appropriate given the language in the contract. And so, although to date Fraport has pretty much ceased its marketing efforts, at the time of this audit, they took the position that they didn't think those funds should be reimbursed. And we concurred with them on that position.
Okay.
The audit also called for the MAA to put in place measures to better monitor their expenditures. And so they submit to us now an annual plan for using those funds, and then we have a monthly meeting with them to go over how they're using those funds. Again, that's when they were using the funds. They've kind of ceased using those funds today.
So if I might,
Yes.
so the auditor suggested that those internal controls or those processes be, revised. Going forward with, in any process with any partner, will you implement those? Will that be a part of your new policies going forward?
Absolutely. We have contract managers for all of our contracts.
Got you.
Including this one, and yes, those
Part
measures
of
are in
it
place.
revised.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The second item was related to our janitorial service contract and our shuttle bus contract. We've put in place measures to make sure that that their invoices more properly reflect the services that they're providing before we approve the invoices. So those measures have been put in place.
Thank you. Same for those, correct?
Pardon me?
Same for those, the revisions are current policy going forward.
For any contract that we
Gotcha.
have, correct.
Thank you.
The third item is related to a development project that we launched off airport. Now, I will remind you that this is in the context of the pandemic. All of this went on during the pandemic. We have a 5-acre lot at the airport, and we thought it would be a good idea to create some revenue-generating opportunities for the restaurant. And so we did a solicitation for a firm to come in and develop a gas station slash convenience store.
For the record, I have used that service station.
Okay. Well, so we combined that with an existing gas station that you may have used. Okay. And so the auditors, when they reviewed the contract, concluded that that perhaps MA did not get the best deal when they negotiated the contract. That was one issue, and that they asked that we have the Department of Transportation conduct a review of the contract to determine or confirm whether or not it's the best deal for the state. MDOT conducted such a review and determined that that it was best that we rescind that contract and that we do something over outside of the COVID environment, because the COVID environment did suppress the potential revenues that the state would have benefited from that project. So that was one. The other issue related to that was an issue of ACDB participation. The auditor concluded that that we did not properly monitor the ACDB program. In that one, we do not share the auditor's conclusion because the contract has phases, and the ACDB program does not kick in until the operational phase. There's the development phase, the construction phase, where there's no revenue being generated. Then there's the operational phase, and that is when the program kicks in. And so at the time of the audit, they were not in the operational phase. One, because the contract was in was being disputed in court. The ACDB was disputing the contract in court. And in the other case, the other property was still going through the permitting process, and so there was no activity on it.
Right, and just again, for the record, vote for acronyms, so, the airport concessions disadvantaged business enterprise, so, got it, all right.
That is the federal
Yes,
program ensuring minorities have access to revenue-generating contracts.
yes,
And so, so now the gas station that you may have visited, the 7-Eleven, is operational. There is ACDB participation, and we are monitoring that participation.
thank you.
I think item 4 is, I just covered it. It was similar. It's the monitoring the ACDB participation on that contract.
All right, cool. Any questions, comments? Appreciate your following through on that and giving us an update, and thank you all. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Sure we'll see MDOT soon. Yeah. And that concludes our hearings for today.